The night in Chicago was colder than usual. The wind moved through the empty streets like a whisper carrying secrets no one wanted to hear. Streetlights flickered, throwing half shadows on the cracked sidewalks. For most people, it was just another winter night. But for Michael Jordan, it was another battle of survival. Michael wasn't the famous basketball legend people thought of when they heard his name. He shared the name, but not the fame. Once, long ago, he had been a small-town basketball coach who dreamed of building a safe life for his family. Those dreams had been strong and shining like the morning sun. But life, with its cruel turns, had taken away his wife, his home, and his career, leaving him with only one thing that truly mattered: his little daughter, Emily. Michael sat on the edge of a broken stone step, holding Emily in his arms. She was only 6, small and fragile, with bright eyes that still carried hope even when her father's eyes had grown weary. He wrapped his old jacket around her tiny shoulders, whispering stories into her ear to distract her from the cold. His words were soft, like a lullaby carried through the bitter air. "Daddy," Emily whispered, her voice shivering as much as her body. "Will we have a warm bed soon?" Michael kissed her forehead. He didn't answer right away. He had learned that promises were heavy things. He couldn't give her false ones, but he also couldn't let her lose hope. "One day, sweetheart," he said gently. "One day we will have a bed so soft it will feel like sleeping on clouds. But tonight we have each other, and that is warmer than any blanket." Emily closed her eyes and leaned her head on his chest. She believed him because to her, her father was the strongest man alive. As the wind howled, people passed by. Some glanced at Michael and his daughter with pity, others with avoidance, but most didn't look at all. To them, he was just another homeless man on another dark corner. They didn't know his story, and perhaps they didn't care. But Michael didn't mind. His focus was only on Emily. That night, while Emily dozed against his chest, a young police officer walked down the street. His name was Tom Hanks. Unlike many officers who had walked past Michael before, Tom noticed something different. He noticed the way Michael held Emily, not as a burden, but as if she were the most precious treasure in the world. Tom slowed his steps, his boots crunching on the pavement. He was new to the force, only a year into his duty, still full of questions about the world and about people. He had been taught to look at everyone with suspicion, but something in Michael's eyes caught him off guard. Those eyes were tired, yes, but they were also filled with quiet strength. Michael noticed Tom approaching. His body stiffened. He had met enough officers in the past to know they rarely came with kindness. Some told him to move along. Others treated him as if he was invisible. He braced himself for another cold command, but Tom didn't speak right away. He simply stood there, looking at Michael and Emily. For a moment it was just silence, broken only by the sound of the wind. Then Michael's voice cut through the air, firm and low. "Don't talk." Tom blinked, surprised. He hadn't even opened his mouth yet, but the warning was clear. Michael's tone was not rude, not angry. It was calm, almost protective. "Excuse me?" Tom asked softly, keeping his voice gentle. Michael shook his head. "Don't talk, just look over there." He tilted his chin toward the corner across the street. Tom followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing unusual, just 2 men standing in the shadows, their heads close together, whispering quickly. But then he noticed the way their hands moved, restless, sliding inside their jackets. Their movements weren't casual. They were sharp, tense. A small shiver ran down Tom's spine. He had walked this beat many times, but he hadn't noticed them until Michael pointed it out. "How did you?" Tom started to ask, but Michael cut him off again with the same firm whisper. "Don't talk." There was no anger in his voice, only urgency. Michael's eyes were locked on the men across the street. He had learned through years of hardship to notice things others missed. The twitch of a hand, the shift of a stance, the look in someone's eyes when they were about to do something dangerous. Survival had sharpened his senses. Tom stood quietly, his hand near his radio, watching the men closely. Michael shifted Emily in his arms, pulling her closer, protecting her with his own body. For a few long minutes, time felt heavy. The men in the shadows kept whispering, their gestures growing sharper, their eyes darting toward the small convenience store nearby. Michael's heart tightened. He had seen this pattern before. He knew what was coming. Finally, one of the men stepped forward, glancing around. He tapped the other on the shoulder. Michael breathed deeply. He didn't want to be part of it. He didn't want his daughter anywhere near danger. But fate had a way of pulling him into storms he tried to avoid. Tom whispered now, his voice barely audible. "What should I do?" Michael looked at him, his face calm despite the storm building around them. "Stay still, watch, not yet." Emily stirred in his arms, her small voice breaking the tension. "Daddy, are we safe?" Michael kissed her hair and whispered, "Yes, my little one. As long as I'm here, you are safe." His words were soft, but inside his heart was heavy. He didn't know what would happen in the next few minutes, but he knew one thing for certain. He would protect his daughter. No matter the cost. Tom kept his eyes on the men, his nerves growing sharper with each passing second. He had training, yes, but training was different from real life. And strangely, it wasn't his training that guided him now. It was the quiet confidence of the homeless man beside him. Michael's warning had been clear. Don't talk. Don't move too soon. Wait. And so they waited in the cold night, as danger prepared to step out of the shadows. The street was still, yet the air felt heavy with tension. The two men across the road kept glancing toward the small convenience store, their movements sharp and restless. One shifted from foot to foot, while the other kept patting his jacket pocket as if checking for something inside. Michael Jordan, holding his daughter Emily close, did not move his eyes away. He had learned long ago that danger often showed itself in small ways. A glance too quick, a hand too eager, a whisper too sharp. Most people walked by without seeing such things. But Michael saw them. Living on the streets had forced him to notice everything. "Don't talk," Michael repeated softly, his voice calm but firm. Officer Tom Hanks stood a few feet away watching. He had been ready to approach Michael to ask if he and the child needed help. But now he found himself caught in a strange moment. A homeless man had noticed danger before he did. That thought alone made Tom pause. Tom was young, still learning the streets. He had joined the police force not only to wear the badge, but to make a difference. Yet, standing beside Michael, he realized that experience wasn't always written in books or taught in training. Sometimes it was carved into a person's eyes by hardship. "What do you see?" Tom whispered, careful to keep his voice low. Michael did not look at him. His gaze stayed fixed on the men. "They are waiting. They are trying to make sure no one is watching. Their bodies tell the story," Tom frowned. He had been trained to observe, but he still didn't see everything Michael claimed. "How do you know?" Michael finally turned his head slightly, his tired eyes meeting Tom's. "Because I have been on streets long enough to know. People who mean no harm don't hide in corners and whisper like that. They don't keep touching their pockets as if guarding something." Emily shifted in her father's arms, her small face pressing into his chest. She didn't understand what was happening, but she could feel the seriousness in her father's voice. "Daddy," she murmured. "Are we leaving?" Michael kissed the top of her head. "Not yet, sweetheart. Just stay close to me." Tom felt a strange respect rising inside him. This man, dressed in torn clothes, carrying his daughter in his arms, seemed more alert and steady than many officers Tom had trained with. The men across the street started moving closer to the store. One of them leaned against the wall as if pretending to wait, while the other peeked through the glass window. Their movements were slow, deliberate, almost rehearsed. Michael's grip on Emily tightened. He looked at Tom again. "When they move together, it will start. Be ready." Tom's hand moved toward his radio. He wanted to call for backup right away, but something in Michael's voice held him back. Michael was not panicking. He was steady, as if he knew exactly when the right moment would come. "You'll scare them too soon if you call now," Michael said quietly, reading Tom's thoughts. "Wait, let them show what they plan to do. If you stop them now, they'll walk away and try again another night. Better to face it when they show their hands." Tom hesitated. Every rule in his training told him to report danger the moment he saw it. But Michael's reasoning made sense. Sometimes catching the truth required patience. The two men glanced around one more time. Then the taller one gave a small nod to his partner. They started walking toward the store, their shoulders stiff with intent. Michael's body tensed. "It's coming," he whispered. Tom felt his pulse quicken. He wanted to step forward, to shout, to stop them. But again, Michael's quiet authority held him back. Emily lifted her head, sensing the rising tension. Her small voice broke the silence. "Daddy!" "I'm scared," Michael kissed her cheek. "Don't be scared, my little one. Daddy is here." Those words were simple, but Tom could feel the weight in them. They weren't just for Emily. They were for himself, too. words of strength spoken even when Michael had nothing else to give. The taller man reached for the store door, pulling it open. The other followed quickly. Michael leaned closer to Tom. "Now is your moment. Call your people." Tom grabbed his radio and spoke quickly, giving the location and reporting suspicious behavior. His voice was steady, but inside his heart pounded. Michael, still holding Emily, stepped back into the shadow of the wall. He didn't want his daughter anywhere near what might happen next. But he also knew that fate had pulled him into this moment. He could not walk away. Minutes felt like hours. Through the glass window of the store, Tom and Michael could see the men speaking sharply to the clerk, their gestures rough, their bodies full of tension. "Should we go in?" Tom whispered. Michael shook his head. "Not yet. Backup will come. If you go in alone now, it will be dangerous. Sometimes patience saves lives." Tom studied Michael for a moment. It was strange. Here he was, an officer in uniform, and yet he was listening to the guidance of a homeless man. But Tom could not deny the truth. Michael's calm wisdom was guiding him more than his own training. Emily tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, why are those men angry?" Michael hugged her close. "Because sometimes people make wrong choices when they feel lost." "But wrong choices only bring more pain." Tom looked at him. "You sound like a teacher." Michael gave a small smile. "I used to be one, in a way. I coached young men in basketball. I taught them discipline, teamwork, patience. Life was simple then." His smile faded. "But life doesn't always stay simple." Tom wanted to ask more, but the sound of raised voices from inside the store pulled their attention back. The clerk behind the counter looked frightened. The taller man slammed his hand on the counter, while the shorter one paced nervously near the door. Michael whispered, "It's about to get worse." Almost as if on cue, the shorter man pushed the door open and stepped outside, scanning the street. His eyes swept past Michael and Tom without stopping. Satisfied, he waved for his partner inside. Tom tensed, ready to step forward. But Michael placed a hand on his arm, shaking his head. "Not yet. Wait for your team." Tom clenched his jaw. It went against his instincts to stand still while wrong was happening, but he trusted Michael's quiet wisdom. Then faintly in the distance, the sound of sirens began to rise. Michael closed his eyes briefly. Relief. Help was coming. The shorter man outside stiffened, hearing the sound. He looked at his partner inside and shouted something. Both men grew restless, glancing around nervously. Tom pressed his radio again. "They're in the store. Backup needed now." Michael stepped slightly forward, Emily still clinging to him. "Stay ready, officer." The moment they panic, they may try to run. And when people run in fear, they can do foolish things. The tension grew sharper with every passing second. Tom realized then that this was not just about stopping two men. This was about choices, about patience, about courage. And somehow, a homeless single father had shown him more about those things in one night than his training had in a year. Michael's eyes never left the men. His grip on Emily was strong. He whispered to her, though his voice was meant for both her and Tom. Courage is not about having power. It's about standing firm when the world feels heavy. Remember that. And as the sirens grew louder, painting the night with urgency, Michael and Tom both knew the moment of truth was about to begin. The sirens grew louder with every passing second, echoing through the narrow street. Blue and red lights flashed faintly in the distance, bouncing against the buildings. For most people, the sound of sirens was a warning. For Michael Jordan, it was hope. For the two men inside the convenience store, it was fear. Michael tightened his hold on Emily, pressing her small head against his chest. His eyes never left the store. He knew the sirens would push the men into making a decision, run, hide, or fight. And when people were afraid, their choices often turned dangerous. Officer Tom Hanks felt his heart beating fast. His hand rested near his belt, ready for action, but Michael's calm presence beside him kept him from rushing forward too soon. Tom's instincts told him to move, but Michael's wisdom told him to wait. Inside the store, the taller man started pacing. He glanced nervously at the shorter one. The clerk behind the counter looked pale, his hands trembling as he tried to remain calm. Then it happened. The taller man shoved his partner toward the door. The shorter man hesitated for a second, then pushed the door open and stepped outside again, scanning the street. His eyes fell on Tom. For a split second, the world seemed to pause. The man's eyes narrowed. His face twisted in frustration. He pointed at Tom and shouted something to his partner inside. "Here it comes," Michael whispered. The taller man burst through the door, his movements fast and aggressive. Both men ran straight toward Tom, not toward escape. Fear had turned into confrontation. Tom stepped forward, raising his hand in warning. "Stop!" he shouted. His voice carried strength, but inside he felt the rush of nerves. The men did not stop. They charged forward, their footsteps loud on the pavement. Michael didn't hesitate. He set Emily gently behind him, pressing her against the wall where she would be shielded. "Stay here, sweetheart. Don't move," he whispered, his voice steady even though his heart was racing. Emily's wide eyes filled with fear, but she nodded. She trusted her father completely. The shorter man reached Tom first, swinging his arm wildly. Tom blocked the hit with his forearm, stumbling back a step. The taller man rushed behind, ready to strike next. Michael moved without thinking. He stepped between the taller man and Tom, shoving the man back with surprising strength. The taller man stumbled, shocked that someone who looked so tired and worn could push him like that. "Now, officer," Michael shouted. Tom grabbed his radio again, calling urgently for backup while trying to defend himself. The shorter man swung again, but Tom blocked and pushed him away. The taller man came back at Michael, trying to grab him, but Michael stood firm. Years of hardship had taken much from him, but it had also given him a kind of strength no one could see until moments like this. He wasn't fighting with muscles. He was fighting with the will of a father who refused to let his child see him fall. Emily watched with tears in her eyes, whispering, "Daddy, please be safe." Michael pushed the taller man back again, his body shaking with effort. "You don't want to do this," he said firmly. His voice carried both warning and compassion. But fear had already clouded the man's judgment. The shorter man tried to slip past Tom, but Tom grabbed him, holding tight despite the struggle. "You're not going anywhere," Tom said through clenched teeth. The taller man lunged at Michael again, and this time Michael stumbled back a step. His body was weary, his energy drained from nights without proper food or rest. But when his eyes fell on Emily standing in the shadow, clutching her small hands together, strength surged through him again. "No one will hurt my daughter," he said under his breath, pushing forward once more. The sound of sirens grew louder, closer now. The men heard it too. Panic filled their faces. The shorter one twisted violently in Tom's grip, trying to escape. The taller one shoved Michael hard, desperate to break free. Tom struggled, his young strength barely enough to hold the man. Michael fell to one knee, pain shooting through his body, but he forced himself up again. He couldn't stay down. "Not tonight, hold on," Tom shouted, his voice breaking with effort. Michael rushed forward once more, grabbing the taller man's arm and pulling him back. The move gave Tom just enough time to hold the shorter one until the flashing lights arrived. In seconds, the street filled with backup officers. They rushed forward, shouting orders, surrounding the two men. Within moments, both were restrained, pulled away from Tom and Michael. The sudden quiet that followed was heavy. The fight was over. Tom bent over, catching his breath. His uniform was wrinkled, his face damp with sweat, but his eyes were wide with relief. Michael leaned against the wall, his body trembling. Emily rushed to him, wrapping her small arms around his waist. "Daddy!" she cried softly. Michael hugged her tightly, his eyes closing. "It's okay, Emily, I'm here." Tom walked over, his voice filled with gratitude. "You saved me tonight. If you hadn't warned me, if you hadn't stepped in." He shook his head, unable to finish the sentence. Michael gave a faint smile. His lip was bleeding slightly, his jacket torn, but his spirit was unbroken. "I only did what I had to do. I couldn't let my daughter watch her father stand by and do nothing." Tom's eyes softened. "You didn't just protect your daughter. You protected me too. You may not wear this uniform, but tonight, you stood like an officer." Michael chuckled weakly. "I'm no officer. I'm just a father trying to keep his little girl safe." The backup officers led the two men away, their shouts fading into the night. The clerk from the store came out, his hands still shaking. "Thank you," he said quietly, his voice full of relief. "If you hadn't been here..." He stopped, emotion catching in his throat. Tom placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "It's over now. You're safe." Michael stayed quiet, holding Emily close. He felt the weight of exhaustion pressing down on him, but he also felt something else. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. For years, people had walked past him without seeing him. To most he was invisible, but tonight he had been seen. Not as a burden, Not as a man who had lost everything, but as a father who stood strong when it mattered most. Emily looked up at him, her small eyes shining. "Daddy, you were brave." Michael kissed her forehead, whispering, "I was brave because of you." Tom looked at him with respect. "Michael, I don't know what tomorrow will bring for you, but I promise you this, I'll make sure people know what you did tonight." Michael didn't answer right away. He looked down at Emily, safe in his arms, then back at Tom. Finally, he said quietly, "All I want is for my daughter to have a better tomorrow." The sirens faded. The street grew still again, but the night had changed. What began as just another cold evening had turned into a story of courage, sacrifice, and hope. And though Michael didn't know it yet, this moment, the night he whispered, "Don't talk," and stood against fear, would change everything for him and his daughter. The flashing lights faded as the police vehicles pulled away, carrying the two men who had tried to escape. The street, once full of noise and chaos, grew quiet again. The cold wind swept through, but for Michael Jordan and his daughter Emily, the night felt strangely warmer. Something had shifted. Michael leaned against the wall, holding Emily close. His body was tired, his face pale, but he stood tall. Emily clung to him with both arms, her small fingers holding on as if she never wanted to let go. Officer Tom Hanks stayed beside them. He didn't leave when the other officers drove away. His eyes kept studying Michael, not with suspicion, but with curiosity and respect. "You knew," Tom said quietly. "You saw it before I did. You warned me before anything happened." Michael gave a faint smile. "When you live on the streets, you learn to watch everything. Danger doesn't always come loud. Sometimes it whispers before it shouts." Tom nodded. He couldn't deny the truth. Michael had saved him that night, not just with words, but with courage. Still, Tom wanted to know more. "Michael," Tom said gently, "why are you out here? A man who can notice danger like that, a man who stands with such courage. You don't belong in the shadows of a street corner. What happened to you?" Michael looked down at Emily. Her eyes were tired, her face soft with trust. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, then looked back at Tom. "My story," Michael said slowly, "isn't easy to tell, but maybe it's time someone heard it." He shifted, sitting on the stone step with Emily still in his arms. The streetlight above them flickered, casting long shadows. Tom sat down nearby, his hands folded, ready to listen. Michael took a deep breath. "Years ago, I wasn't like this. I wasn't living on the streets. I had a home. I had a job. I had a family. My wife, Sarah, and I lived in a small house outside the city. It wasn't big, but it was filled with love. I was a basketball coach at a local high school. Coaching wasn't just my job, it was my passion. I believed in helping young people find discipline, teamwork, and hope through the game." His voice grew softer. "And then Sarah got sick. At first it was small things. A cough that wouldn't go away. Tiredness that didn't make sense. But soon the doctors gave us the news no one ever wants to hear. It wasn't something that could be fixed." Michael's eyes glistened as he looked at the ground. Emily snuggled closer into his chest, sensing the weight of his words. "I tried everything," he continued. "Every dollar I saved went to her treatment. I worked double hours, I sold what I could. But in the end, love wasn't enough to heal her body. When she passed, it felt like the world broke in half." Tom listened silently, his heart heavy with each word. Michael's voice grew rough, but he kept speaking. "I lost more than my wife. I lost myself. I couldn't keep up with the bills. I couldn't focus on coaching. Parents didn't want their children led by a man who couldn't keep his own life together. Slowly, everything slipped away. The job, the house, the comfort. All I had left was Emily. And I promised myself no matter how far we fell, I would never let her feel unloved." Emily lifted her head, her small voice gentle. "Daddy always tells me stories at night so I don't feel scared," she said softly, looking at Tom. "Even when we're outside, he makes it feel like home." Tom smiled warmly at her, his eyes softening even more. Then he looked back at Michael. "You've carried so much, and yet you stood strong tonight. Most men with a warm bed would not have done what you did." Michael shook his head. "I didn't stand strong for myself. I stood strong because Emily was watching. A child learns what courage looks like from their parents. I don't have much left to give her, but I can give her that." For a moment, silence filled the street. Only the sound of the wind moved between them. Then Tom said quietly, "Michael, you may think you've lost everything, but tonight you showed me something more valuable than money. More valuable than a house or a job. You showed me what it means to stand for someone else. Michael smiled faintly. It's what any father would do. Tom leaned forward. No, not every father. Some would walk away. Some would give up. You didn't. That makes you different? Emily yawned softly, her head resting on her father's shoulder. Michael wrapped his jacket tighter around her, his tired eyes watching her fall asleep. Tom felt a tug at his heart. Here was a man who had every reason to give up, but instead, he carried the weight of love and responsibility with quiet dignity. Michael, Tom said after a pause, I don't want this to be the end of your story. You don't deserve to stay invisible on the streets. Let me help you. Michael looked at him carefully. He had heard promises before, words spoken with good intention but no follow-through. Still, something in Tom's voice sounded different, steadier, honest. You don't need to help me, Michael said. You already have. Just by listening, Tom shook his head. No, listening isn't enough. People need to know about you, about what you did tonight. They need to see the man I see. A father who stood against fear. A man who saved not only a police officer but everyone in that store. Michael chuckled softly. Stories don't usually get told about men like me. Then I'll tell it, Tom said firmly. I'll make sure it's heard. Michael studied him for a long moment. Then finally he nodded. If you want to tell my story, don't make it about me. Make it about Emily. She's the reason I keep going. Tom's eyes grew warm. Then we'll make it about her smile, and the father who made sure she still had one. The streetlight above them flickered again, but this time the shadows felt less heavy. Tom stood, adjusting his jacket. Come with me. At least for tonight, you shouldn't be out here in the cold. There are shelters that work with us. I can make sure you get a warm bed, even just for now. Michael hesitated. He had been to shelters before. Some were kind, others less so. But tonight, seeing Tom's sincerity, he decided to trust. He lifted Emily gently, cradling her against his chest. All right, he said softly. Tom smiled. Good, let's go. As they walked down the quiet street together, Michael felt something stirring inside him. It wasn't comfort, not yet. But it was something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. For the first time since Sarah's passing, he wondered if maybe the world still had a place for him and Emily. Maybe their story wasn't over. And though Michael didn't know what tomorrow would bring, he knew one thing clearly: tonight he had been seen. Not as a homeless man, not as someone forgotten, but as a father, as a protector, as a man who still had worth. The truth had been spoken, and it had changed everything. The next morning, the city awoke as it always did, with the hum of traffic, the chatter of people hurrying to work, and the smell of coffee drifting from small shops. But for Michael Jordan and his daughter Emily, this day was not like any other. They had spent the night in a warm shelter, thanks to Officer Tom Hanks. Emily had slept soundly for the first time in months, her small body wrapped in clean blankets. Michael, too, had rested, though his mind remained restless. He wasn't used to comfort anymore. The silence of the shelter felt strange compared to the cold sounds of the streets. When Emily woke, her first words were soft and full of wonder. Daddy, this feels like a real home. Michael smiled, brushing her hair gently. Yes, sweetheart. Even if it's only for one night, it is a gift. But what neither of them knew was that their story had already started to spread. Tom Hanks had stayed true to his word. After returning to the station, he shared everything. How a homeless father had warned him, how he had stood firm against danger, and how his bravery had saved lives. His words carried weight because they weren't just told with duty. They were told with admiration. Soon, a local reporter heard the story. Then another. And by noon, the name Michael Jordan, though not the famous athlete, was being spoken in coffee shops, bus stops, and offices. A homeless father saves police officer, the headlines read. Courage on the streets. Michael Jordan protects his daughter and a city cop. People who had walked past Michael countless times without noticing now stopped to read about him. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. Later that afternoon, Tom arrived at the shelter. Michael was sitting with Emily, helping her draw shapes on a piece of paper the volunteers had given her. Michael, Tom said warmly, how are you both doing? Emily looked up with a bright smile. Officer Tom, she said, rushing over to him. Tom knelt down, shaking her hand gently. "How's my little hero today?" Emily giggled. "I'm not the hero, Daddy is." Tom looked at Michael, his expression full of respect. "She's right. You are." Michael shook his head. "I'm just a father. That's all." "That's more than enough," Tom said firmly. Then he added, "Michael, the city knows your story now. People are talking. They want to help." Michael frowned slightly. "Help?" "Yes. Some have already called the station. They want to offer support, a place to stay, food, clothes. Your courage touched people. It reminded them that heroes don't always wear uniforms." Michael's chest tightened with emotion. He had never asked for help, not because he didn't need it, but because he had grown used to being overlooked. And now strangers were reaching out. Over the next few days, more people came forward. A local diner offered free meals for Michael and Emily. A small clothing store donated warm jackets. Volunteers from a housing program arranged for a temporary apartment so they could leave the shelter. Michael was overwhelmed. Each act of kindness felt like sunlight breaking through years of clouds. Emily's laughter grew brighter each day, her eyes shining with joy. One evening, as they sat in their new apartment, a modest but warm place, Emily turned to her father. "Daddy, is this forever?" Michael hugged her gently. "I don't know yet, sweetheart, but even if it isn't forever, it's the beginning of something better." One quiet night, Tom visited again. He sat with Michael on the small balcony of the apartment, looking out at the city lights. "You know," Tom said, "I keep thinking about what you told me about being a coach." Michael nodded slowly. "That was another life." "But why should it stay in the past?" Tom asked. "The schools need people like you. Kids need someone who can guide them, not just in the game, but in life. You've lived through hardship, Michael. You can teach lessons no book ever could." Michael sighed. "Would they even accept me? I've been invisible for years. I don't have the same life anymore." Tom leaned forward. "Michael, the world saw you stand tall when everything was against you. If that doesn't make you worthy of teaching courage, I don't know what does." Michael thought about it. He looked at Emily, who was inside, drawing pictures on the table. She was his reason for everything. Maybe Tom was right. Maybe he could still give something to the world. A week later, a local high school reached out. They had heard about Michael's past as a coach, and after reading his story, they wanted to meet him. Nervous but hopeful, Michael agreed. When he walked into the gym, memories came flooding back. The sound of bouncing balls, the squeak of sneakers, the laughter of young players. The principal greeted him kindly, and after a long conversation, they offered him a chance. Not a full coaching job, not yet, but a volunteer role to guide students after school. It wasn't much, but to Michael, it felt like the start of a new chapter. That evening, when he told Emily, her eyes lit up. "Daddy, you'll be a coach again. Can I come watch?" Michael laughed softly, hugging her. "Of course, sweetheart. You'll be my #1 fan." Months passed. Michael worked with students at the school, slowly rebuilding not only his career but his confidence. Emily thrived, making friends and smiling more each day. Their small apartment became a home filled with warmth, laughter, and hope. Tom continued visiting, not just as an officer, but as a friend. He often joined Michael and Emily for dinner, sharing stories and laughter. To Emily, he became Uncle Tom, a figure of safety and kindness. One evening, a reporter asked Michael what he thought about the night everything changed, the night he whispered, "Don't talk," and warned Tom. Michael looked at Emily, who was drawing at the table, her face glowing with peace. Then he answered softly, "That night I didn't think about being brave. I thought only of my daughter. I thought of the promise I made to her, to keep her safe, and to show her that courage is not about power, but about love. I didn't expect anyone to notice. But maybe that's the lesson. Sometimes the quietest acts of courage speak the loudest." The reporter smiled. "And what do you hope for now?" Michael's eyes softened. "I hope my daughter grows up knowing that even when life takes everything away, love, and courage can still build a new tomorrow. And with those words, the story of Michael Jordan, the homeless single dad who once stood unseen in the shadows, became a story of hope for an entire city. He had been invisible, but through love, courage, and a single whisper, "Don't talk," he had changed not only his life but the lives of many who now looked at him with respect. For Emily, he was not just her father. He was her hero, and for everyone else he became proof that even in the darkest nights, light can rise again.